Welcome to Motion Teaching, where I teach the essential 5% of After Effects for designers and creators. Tutorial 2, Icon Animation. Now, in this second tutorial, I'm going to get a little bit deeper into After Effects and show you some essential tools to the motion design process. And we're going to do that with the project, Icon Animations. Okay, so here is Google's Material Design Standards version 3, the motion section. And I just want to show you where this is right now. This URL is important just to kind of mess around with and know that it exists. There's a lot of great info if you want to lean towards the user experience or user interface design part of motion. It does a really great job. What I want to work on though is actually the second version, version 2 of Material Design Standards, because it has a really nice section right here about icons and illustrations and how to animate them. Animated icons can playfully reinforce or add to the icon's meaning. That's really awesome. And it also just drives engagement, and it's very nice to look at. So what we're going to do is recreate these icons in Illustrator and then prep the file to be animated in After Effects. I'm going to show you right now. I've already created them inside Illustrator. So the reason why I think these icons and these animations are really useful as a tutorial is because each of these icons represents some facet of learning After Effects that can be really powerful and really essential going forward in whatever kind of motion design that you end up doing. For instance, we'll get into anchor points and shape layers in the thumb. We'll do masks and some other graph editor and animation stuff in the lock. And there's also some track matte and other animation effects in the shopping cart. What I don't want to do is this wrench, because basically it's just a moving icon. And all that we would be messing with is the anchor point of rotation for this animation. So I'm going to show you what the icons that I created in Illustrator. It's a bell, a hand, a lock, and the shopping cart. So we're going to animate these four in separate little small tutorials, and each of these icons is going to showcase a really essential aspect of learning After Effects that you can take with you going forward. The reason why I picked the bell is because of anchor points and masks and parenting. Those three features and those three tools in After Effects are super useful for motion design. So we have these four icons to be animated, but first of all I want to prep this file for After Effects. Now there's a couple of things about Illustrator that's important to know about. If I open up this layers panel right here, typically this is what happens when you create an Illustrator file from scratch, is all the paths and objects live inside one layer in Illustrator. Now that's nice for Illustrator, but what's cool about After Effects and how Illustrator works with After Effects is After Effects can actually read the different layers that are created in Illustrator files and will import those files as compositions, and each layer will be a layer inside After Effects. So if I was going to import this into After Effects right now, it would just be this one layer that would show up, and everything inside of it right here would be compressed into one layer, and we couldn't cut it up, or at least it'd be really hard to cut up and super annoying. And I want to show you how we're going to start using Illustrator as the beginning point of animation. So we create our images, illustrations, whatever we're going to be animating, or even the storyboards, we can use Illustrator to start with, and that'll give us a really great framework to start animating in After Effects. And also, it's the worst to open up After Effects with a blank screen and try to create from scratch. So Illustrator gives us that ability to begin the creative process and lay things out in a really flexible, easy way, and then we can animate with that file in After Effects. One more thing to note about Illustrator and After Effects, you can't, if I was going to use the artboard tool to make a new artboard like this, After Effects only reads one artboard. It can't read more than one artboard to import. So everything has to be put onto one artboard, but then layered out for each icon. And so I'm going to show you that process right now once I get rid of this artboard. Okay, so first of all, I just want to add more layers to this file, just a bunch right now, because we can delete them later if we don't use them. And I'm going to separate every part that I want to be animating into each separate layer. So take, for instance, this hand. We have the actual hand and we have the wrist. So I want these two things to be separate layers, actually. And the really cool workflow I found to be really easy for Illustrator is to just select this object and then cut, Control or Command X, and I can just select a layer. I'm going to start right here at the top. And instead of doing Command V, which will just place it in the middle of the screen, which is what I don't want, I can do Shift Command or Control V, and it's called Paste in Place right here, Shift Control V. And that just means it keeps it in the same spot that it was cut from, but now it's on a new layer, and that's great. So I can just double click this, rename it, same thing here, cut, Shift Control V to paste, and now we have two separate layers. Same with this right here. This bell actually has a fill and a stroke. So the ringer part right here is just above the bell. If I put it below it, right here, looks more like this. But we're obviously going to put the ringer and the bell on different layers. I also want to show you a shortcut too for Illustrator that's really helpful. Shift Command D will just show transparency grid. So if I do the view drop down, it's right here, hide transparency grid, Shift Control D or Command D. That lets you know what parts are filled and what parts are transparent. So this hand is actually transparent, but the bell is filled, so is the lock. Anyway, Shift Command or Control D. Okay, select this, cut, Shift Command V, select this, cut. There we go. Now this dot doesn't need its own layer because it's just going to be part of the lock. So really this right here is just the lock, which is the square and the dot in the middle. Now this part I'm just going to call the locker, is what's going to actually be moving up and down. Okay, great. Now we have the shopping cart. Basically it's just going to be the plus will be its own layer, and then the rest of the shopping cart will be its own layer. So I'm just going to select this plus and put it right here, Shift Command V. I'm just going to do this, shopping cart plus, and then shopping cart. Okay, there we go. Now they're all layered out. I'm going to delete these. If we go back to the transparency grid, you can see that this is actually transparent, which is fine. Save this. And now I'm just going to go into After Effects and import this file and show you what it looks like. So here I am with a blank project. I'm just going to double click right here in the project panel and import. Okay, so I've got the file right here. Now before I hit the import button, I want to make sure that down here in this drop down it's set to import as composition, retain layer sizes. Now once I have that selected, I'll hit import, and there we go. So we have a composition and we have a folder of all the different layers that we had created and named in the Illustrator file. Okay, so I'll double click on this composition to open it up, and there we go. We have this. Now this is transparent right here. You can see because this transparency grid is turned on. Just make sure, in case you can't, if it turns out like this, that just means that the background color is black and the transparency grid's turned off. So just make sure that's turned on. And here we are. We have all the different layers that we created and named in Illustrator, all laid out as individual layers in After Effects. It's a super useful, very flexible way to work when bringing this type of artwork into After Effects. Now I'm just going to hit Control Y to add a solid layer, which will be white, just so we have it. A white solid shows up. Drag it down here. Now, this is a very good thing to get into, layer color coding. For me at least, it's been a game changer to just keep things organized. I'm going to separate these layers out so they're not the same color and make sure I'll just color code them into each of the groups that they are in. So I'll just do that. I mean, it doesn't really matter what the color is, as long as it's, you know, separated out visually. I have a thing for the orange and purple and green. I just think they're nice. They separate out everything and they just make it very clear what belongs to what. Okay, so here we go. They're all set up, and now you can see now that the layer color has changed, the bounding box color has changed as well. This is all, and just personal preference. I'll take this to none, which is just kind of like a dark gray, since it's just going to be the background. Okay, this composition is all set up now to be animated. I'm going to start with the wrist and the hand first. Okay, so I want to get started animating the hand first. And I'm also going to import the video that was on the website right here. So I downloaded this video already, and I'm going to show you how to import that. And it's super easy. As long as we go into this project panel right here, we can just double click on the empty area right here, and it'll bring up the import window. You can also, if you'd like, go to File, Import, right here. Import File, Control I. Just double click here. I've got it right here. And now it shows up as a file right here, and I can just double click on it. It'll bring up this panel, the footage panel. And I can just, right here, zoom in, or also Command or Control plus or minus. I'm just going to hit spacebar to play. The thumb kind of flips up as the wrist flips up. And this is a really nice move for a couple reasons. There's parenting involved, which I'll show you, and there's also this cool trick that After Effects does with Illustrator files, where it actually can convert the vector file into a shape layer so that we can then edit the path of the thumb to give it that. We can then animate the path of the thumb kind of popping up and going back to normal. So there's a couple of cool things happening with the hand right here. I think it's a good one to get started in. Now just so you know, if you get lost in this panel, sometimes it's like you have this panel open and you start going into here, and it might not always convert. It might not always flip over to the composition panel. So just make sure you look up here. There's the footage panel and the composition panel. They usually are next to each other. Okay, so let's start with the hand. And the first thing I want to do is convert this vector layer into a shape layer so we have the path that we can then animate. Now we have the wrist and hand right here. I'm just going to hit Control or Command I to zoom in. Now the reason why it looks blurry right here is because, first of all, this drop down right here is the amount of resolution in the viewport. So it's set to third, which means every third pixel it's rendering. And this right here would be every fourth pixel. And then full is every pixel is rendered. So it looks like this, which is nice because we're at 100% view at full resolution. I think you'll get used to working in resolutions like this just for performance. But for this, I'll just start at full just so you see it. Okay, so we have the wrist and we have the hand as separate files. And I'm just going to select the hand right here and right click that layer and go to create shapes from vector layer. Now this only works with Illustrator files. And there we go. So now it's made a copy of this layer, and it's hidden the original layer and made a copy and then made that visible. It also makes it blue, which is not my favorite color for that. So I'm just going to change it to green so it stays inside of that kind of visual group. But now you can see this line is right here, and that's the actual path of this hand. If I expand this layer, you'll see the transform that we've already gone through. And then contents right here, I expand this more, we have the path actually. If I select this, you can see now the points as if we were inside Illustrator, but we're in After Effects, which is great. We also have the stroke right here, so we can change the stroke width if we'd like in there. And of course we can animate it because there's a stopwatch icon next to it. So what we're going to want to do is animate the path so that we can move that thumb, kind of have it start down and then flip up and then go back to normal. If we go back here, we can start to study that move. It's kind of cool too because the hand comes away from the wrist right there. It's just kind of a cool little touch, which we'll also do. Okay, so let's start with the thumb, the path itself, and we'll just do a rough thing where we just we know it stays right there, and then it moves down, and then it moves up, and then moves down again, and then goes back to normal. So we'll just do a very rough animation of that with these paths. Now we know it's going to end right here, so I'm just going to hit the keyframe stopwatch right here as a way to kind of capture that final position of the thumb. So we have that saved. Now I just want to make sure, sometimes this happens where you select this or you select this and you can't get to the anchor points or you can't get to the path points to edit. You can just come down here and select. You can see how they're empty boxes right now. That means they can be selected and moved. And now that we have this stopwatch engaged, anything that we do to edit that path will now become a keyframe, which is really nice. And I can also, if I mess up, I can just delete this keyframe. Okay. Go back here. I'm going to select these and just have them kind of move down like that. This behaves a lot like Illustrator. Needs to come forward a little bit. That's okay for now. And then I'm going to go past the original position keyframe so that we can do the kind of move back right here like this. This is going to be kind of messy. Now the cool part too is I can just copy and paste this middle keyframe like that. So it starts down, goes back, and then it goes and it rests at the original. So what I can do too is I can select all these keyframes and move them down the timeline and then actually copy and paste the original keyframe. So oof, that's messy. We have the good start though. Okay, so there's other cool trick that's very helpful is so this is obviously going way too slow, right? It's not what we want. I want to speed it up, but I don't want to drag every single individual keyframe and place them manually. What I can do is select all of them with the box and hold down Alt and grab either the first or the last keyframe and click and drag. So I can actually proportionally scale this whole animation and all the spacing will stay the same in relation to each other. So I'm able to really quickly speed up or slow down the animation. It needs to be even faster, I think. That's getting there. Okay, so we can start with that. What I'm going to do instead right now is just move this down the timeline. so we can focus on the wrist and the hand moving. And this opens up a really great essential tool in After Effects, which is parenting. So right here you have the parent and link column in the timeline. What I'm going to do is actually I want to parent the hand to the wrist. And what that means is whatever I do to transform the wrist layer is going to be put onto the hand layer as well. And the easy way to do that is to just take this pick whip and select the wrist. And now you can see on this hand outlines layer, wrist is set as the parent of that layer. So now if I go into the wrist layer and I rotate just the wrist, it'll move the hand too, because the hand is now a child of that wrist layer. Or you could say the hand is parented to the wrist layer. Now again, if I take this off and I rotate this again, it's not going to happen. So this parenting is really, really helpful for animations. So again, I'm going to take the hand outlines layer, take the pick whip for the parent and link column, and then just select the wrist layer. So now we've got them, they're both connected together. But what I want to do is we go back to this reference. The anchor point for the rotation is actually somewhere down here. It's not really in the middle of this wrist layer. So I'm going to select the wrist layer, and you see this is the anchor point right here of the layer, and I'm going to use Y, the anchor point tool right here, the pan behind or anchor point tool, shortcut Y. I'm going to grab the anchor point and just move it about right there, it looks like. And now if I do this, that feels more like what's happening. Now what's cool too is I can still rotate the child layer independent of the wrist layer. So what I want to do, and that's kind of what's happening with the reference, is the hand is coming away from the wrist right there. So I'm going to, again, take the pan behind anchor point tool, shortcut Y, and move this anchor point to about, I think, it seems like right there. And so if we just do a little rotation like this and then rotation like this, I'm going to just go back to 0 on both of these. I actually think this anchor point is a little bit, it's actually more like right here. Maybe like that. Try again. Yeah, that feels more like it. Okay, that's great. And that's, this is what a lot of motion design is just kind of, messing around and tweaking things. So we have the anchor points are set up for both of these layers now. I'm going to zero out this rotation for both of them. And now we've got a good little rig set up where the wrist will drive the animation, and we'll do a little bit of just kind of spicing up the animation by a little bit of rotation with the hand. So what we'll do first is hit the stopwatch for the rotation, because it's going to be the base point, the beginning. Just come out here. I'm also going to hit the stopwatch for the hand as well. Come down here, do this, and then do this. Like that. Just kind of rough in the animation, and then it comes up. This actually comes in like this, but then it's going to come down, like it's going to come closer to the wrist as the wrist comes back down. And then back to normal. So it's very rough. Let's see. Okay. very rough. I'm actually going to just move this final resting animation. There we go. So I need to move this down a little bit, the final move, because it actually comes, it goes up and then it comes back down and then comes back to this resting. So I'm going to just go in the middle right here and move this down a little bit. Oops. Like that. Move this down a little bit. Okay, it's not bad, but you know, it needs some finessing. So we can do the same thing with these keyframes. Select them all, even if they're on different layers, hold down Alt and drag either the first or last one to compress it. It's not bad. We're going to go in the graph editor to finesse it just when I get these together. So then I also want to have the animation for the path. So here's a cool, this is another great shortcut, the shortcut U. What that does is it only reveals animated properties of a layer. Instead of having to dig down into the different menus and parameters of a layer, you can just hit U if you've already made animations. We've already got the thumb animation created, so I just hit U to drag it over. And I just need to time it out now and place it. Not too bad. What I'm going to do though is take that final thumb move and put it right there, because I want to do another move. Let's see, right there. And just have the thumb come down. Okay, that's not too bad. But now what needs to happen is we need to finesse the animation in the graph editor. Now I'm just doing this because, so you can see the playhead doesn't actually place on the keyframe. That's what happens when you drag these like this and you go like this. It happens sometimes where the keyframes kind of go in between frames, so you can, if you want, it's just kind of, it doesn't do anything damaging. It's like a nervous tick of mine to just make sure that they get placed on a frame. So if I zoom into the timeline in the individual frames, as these black and gray lines are, they're individual frames. You can see how the keyframes basically kind of live between frames because of the way they were scaled. This is a totally subjective, but So I'll explain why that happens. Okay, cool. So now we can go to the graph editor. We can go one at a time. Just right here, this rotation. And I select the graph editor. Now, this is confusing because it's the speed graph. What we actually want to use is the value graph. And it should make more sense. Basically, as the rotation goes positive, it goes up here, and then it goes negative right here, which means it goes kind of back to positive, and then back to original again. So we just want to smooth these curves out. And a lot of it can be done by just highlighting the keyframes and hitting right here Easy Ease, which will add Bezier handles to all the points and give it a little bit of smoothing as they move in and out of those keyframes. That's not too bad. So now I can select the rotation of the hand outlines, same kind of thing right here. Just select them all and do Easy Ease. This one right here, I don't know if we actually need it. That was an original keyframe. Okay, great. If I zoom in with the plus button, you can see how this works. You might just want to smooth out some of this graph so that, it's just not so kind of like abrupt like that. I'm actually just going to delete this keyframe. It doesn't need to be there. Makes this a lot smoother. Now, because I animated the path, I'm going to show you what this looks like in the graph editor. That's the value graph. It's also the speed graph. Basically, there's no velocity in a path animation, and so you can't really do a lot. You can select the keyframes and Easy Ease them, and then you'll do this, and that kind of helps. But yeah, it's path animations can't really be tweaked or finessed in the graph editor. That's not too bad right there, actually. Let's see how it compares. It's just faster. Which we can do faster. It's almost too fast. We'll do 20 frames. There we go. That's the first animation. And we went over parenting, converting a vector Illustrator file into a shape layer so we can animate the path. That's two very essential, important things to know about After Effects in the Illustrator-to-After Effects workflow. And next we'll move on to the bell. Okay, here we are, animating the bell. Now I had a thought before I started animating this bell. I realized that this bell is filled with a white color. You can see right here as I turn the transparency grid on, this is actually white. Now, this would work if the background was always going to be white, but that's not always the case. And if you want a real animated icon that has a lot of flexibility, you'd want this part to be transparent and this bell part to be masked out, which led me to realize this is actually a great lesson in masking and using the bell as an example of a very simple use of masking that we can just get started using, because again, masking is one of those very essential skills in After Effects. And there's also another cool part of the Illustrator to After Effects workflow that I want you to know too. If I go into Illustrator and bring this file up, if I show the transparency grid right here, Shift Control D, you can see how this is filled with white. I can change the file in Illustrator, save it, it'll update in After Effects. So let's do that right now. There is the bell shape, and you can see down here it's got the white fill with the black stroke, and I'm just going to do that and make it clear. Oh, sorry. Do that, make it clear, and there we go. It's going to show the bell ringer through the bell. And of course I could just cut this circle in half because it's just going to be shown right here anyway, but I'm going to use this as an example of masking in After Effects. So now that I've taken the fill off, I'm going to save the file in Illustrator, go back to After Effects, and you can see it took a second, but now it updated and it's now transparent. If I turn the background off, you can see this is now transparent. The ability to update the source files in Illustrator and have those changes reflect in After Effects immediately is also a really great thing to know about this workflow between Illustrator and After Effects. So now that we have that change made, let's start animating. Now the way I'm going to do this mask is actually going to be called track matte. And it's going to use a mask too, but I'm going to show you this process because solids and masking and track mattes are a very important skill to know in After Effects. So first of all, what I'm going to do is create a solid, Command or Control Y, any color, doesn't really matter. I'm going to make it 500 by 500 because it doesn't need to be very big. Drag this right here over the bell. I'm also going to just drag the layer order to be underneath the bell, but above the ringer. So I'm going to rename this Bell Matte. Now I'm going to use a mask on this solid, but then the solid itself will become a matte for the bell. That's how I'm going to explain this now, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so I'm just going to put the solid about right here. Zoom out a little bit. Okay, so now that I have a layer selected, this is really important to know in After Effects, I can use the shape tool, the rectangle, ellipse, star. If I do that right now, if I select the shape layer or the shape tool and I have this layer selected, if I draw a rectangle shape, I'm actually making a mask on that solid layer. And you can see as I drag this mask out, I'm actually going beyond the boundaries of that solid. Now it's hard to see yellow. I'm going to turn this transparency grid off so you can see that. I'm also going to change the color. This is important to know too. So this is the color right here of the mask. I can just double click that little color swatch and change it. I'm just going to make it like a blue, like that. So I can turn the transparency grid back on, and now it's easy to see. So I just want to show you, this is important to know, when you have a layer selected and you go to the shape tool, you're going to draw a mask automatically on that layer with that shape. Now if I just go to the mask right here and hit delete, it goes away. Just to show you, if I have like the ellipse tool, I can draw a circle mask. Anyway, I'm going to undo that. What I can also do is use the pen tool right here. So I can actually just click points like I would, and if I connect it together, it becomes a mask as well. And I can also move these points around. I can move the points around to a rectangle or ellipse as well. But the pen tool is really nice because then we can kind of do very precise masks like this underneath the bell, like that. So I'm going to delete that mask and do it again. Got the pen tool, and you see the icon right here on the cursor is that kind of mask icon, that square with the black circle in the middle. So what I'm going to do is zoom in and just start making a mask like this. Now if I click and drag, I can create Bezier handles just like you would in Illustrator. So I'm going to actually make a little curve right here just for fun. Okay, now that it's completed, the mask is made. Now I'm going to turn this bell layer off just to show you. This is the mask of that white solid layer. And that's great. Turn the bell back on. So obviously the bell outline is hiding the mask boundaries. Okay, now that we have the matte created, which is the solid layer with the mask, we're going to use this to cut out the ringer right here. Now the way to do that is going to be one of these commands right here, but it's not going to be the parent and link command. What I have to do down here is toggle switches and modes, this button right here. Now you can right click up here and customize the column that you want to see in the timeline. I don't need to see stretch. I'm going to uncheck that. You see that goes away. I can switch this back like that to see these switches and the parents. I can also come back to these transfer modes, track mats, and the parents will be together. What I want is this track mat right here. Now this is a new feature in After Effects 2023, and it's a really cool one. Now before, you'd have to have specific layer orders and things like that to make mats work. That doesn't work anymore. That isn't the way we do it anymore, which is great. All we can do now is use the pick whip, and we can actually have this layer down here. Any layer order is fine, because what we're going to use is the pick whip to create this mat right here. So what I want is actually, I don't want this mat, I don't want to pick the track mat to be like this. Now as you can see what happens, if I turn this off, the ringer has actually become the layer that reveals the mat. This might be confusing right now, but this will make sense in a second. So I'm going to just use this drop down right here and go back to no mat. So it's now a solid layer again. And then what I want to do is reverse that. I want actually the ringer, I'm going to turn this back on too. I want the ringer to be cut out by this mat. So I'm going to use the ringer, I'm going to use the pick whip and select the bell mat. So what's happening is the opaque parts of this layer are revealing this layer. And that's really useful for some things, but we want it to be inverted. We want the non-opaque parts to show the ringer layer. And right here are these icons right here. So we have, if I hover over, alpha matte is selected, which means alpha is the opacity of a layer. So the opaqueness of a layer is the alpha channel. And right here I can invert this. And there we go. So we use the alpha matte, which is, alpha means opacity, and we inverted that. So basically the parts of that layer, of the bell mat layer, that are not opaque, that are transparent, are going to be used to reveal this layer. And now we have a transparent bell and a ringer that is masked out so that it can still move. If I open position by hitting P, it can still move and be masked out by that bell mat. Now of course we're just going to be animating it like this, as if it's ringing the bell, but you can see as I move it outside, because the mat that we created is only inside this bell, this part will be shown. Go back to here. Okay, so there we go. We've created a bell mat by creating a solid layer, masking it out with the pen tool, and then using that to hide the part of the ringer that is covered up by the bell itself. And now this is transparent, so any color can be put in here that'll match out here for any kind of interaction you want to do, and this will also be covered up. So this is great. Now we just need to animate the bell and the ringer, and we'll use parenting that we started using with the hand icon. We'll parent the ringer to the bell and animate both of them. Okay, so let's start with the bell itself. Now if we hit R for rotation and start rotating, obviously the bell is rotating around the anchor point. So we got to move the anchor point, hit Y, shortcut for the anchor point tool, and grab that and move it to be about right here where that hinge would be for that bell. Now, once we rotate, perfect. I'm going to change this resolution to be quarter for performance. There we go. And the next step is to parent the ringer to the bell. Pick whip on the parent and link column and connect that to the bell. There we go. Now you see what's going on here. We also have to parent the bell mat to the bell so that it rotates with the bell too. So I'm going to go back and zero this rotation. Now the bell mat, by default, it hides itself once it's selected as the mat. Once I selected the bell mat as the mat for the ringer, it hid itself automatically. So I just got to parent that to the bell as well. Now everything works. We just need to do a quick animation for the bell and then an animation of the position of the ringer, and we're done. Hit the stopwatch. Go up. Go back. I'm just going to select that keyframe, copy and paste it. Okay, it's very basic right now. Again, we can just use that shortcut where we select the keyframes, hold down Alt, and compress the animation once we feel like we're in a good spot. Okay, so as the bell goes up here, the ringer, I'm going to set the main keyframe right here, so the ringer keyframe is at the bottom of this animation. As it comes up here, I'm going to move it like that, actually like this, and then as it rings, as it swings back like that, and then back to the middle. I actually think there needs to be one more kind of swing. So 1, 2, and then 3, and then back to 0. So what I'm going to do, because I know these two are like where the animation is going to end, I'm just going to move this farther down the timeline and make another quick little animation like that. Oh. Okay. That's okay. I'm going to select all these, hold down Alt, and compress this animation to be about 1 second. That's still too slow, but what I want to do before we get any faster is go to the graph editor and finesse this rotation. Here we are in the value graph in rotation, so you can see how it starts at 0, it goes negative, and then swings back to positive, and then negative, and then 0. So all we can really need to do is select these keyframes and use Easy Ease, which will add those Bezier curves. I'm going to hit the plus sign right here to just zoom into this timeline a little bit. I'm also going to move this down so we get some more space. Okay, awesome. Let's see how it looks right now. Okay, that's not bad. I kind of want some more force though, so I think like have it swing a little bit more. I also don't want it to ease out of the first animation. I'm just going to have it, I'm going to bring this handle down like this so it just kind of, it actually starts pretty quickly into that first swing and then swings back. And then the same thing here. Like that. That's getting nice. That's smooth. Obviously the ringer needs to be finessed too, but I like how the bell looks right now. Okay, position. All we need to do for the ringer really is select these are the X position values. You can see it kind of mirrors the rotation. I'm just going to select these keyframes and hit easy ease just to give it some more softness. Make sure these keyframes match up. Okay, I'm going to squeeze it some more. I kind of want the ringer to like come to rest a little bit after the bell's done. So I want maybe one more little animation of the ringer. I'm going to move this out. You know what's happening right here is it's not really, you want this bell to like start shaking and then shake the ringer. So it needs, right now the ringer is kind of just, I don't know, it's kind of, it just feels kind of wobbly. It doesn't really feel like it's being rung. So what needs to happen, I think, is actually kind of increase the amount of movements in the ringer. If I bring that, so it kind of, it swings and then we hit it right there and it's going to bounce and then bounce again. Like that. There we go. This is where it gets kind of subjective. We could add more liveliness to the ringer and all that kind of stuff, but I think right now this is in a really good spot, at least for a really good first version. Okay, next up is the lock.